I need to create a detailed story outline first before writing the full 12,000-word story. Margaret, 62, introduces herself as a widow who worked hard all her life. Brief mention of her son Daniel, 36, and his wife Jessica, 33. Hint at close relationship that changed after marriage. Quick reference to discovering her bank account emptied. Shock of seeing vacation photos from Europe on social media. Foreshadow the revenge. They never thought I'd fight back. End with call to action. Before I tell you how my own son betrayed me and what I did about it, let me know where you're watching from. Hit that subscribe button if you've ever had to stand up for yourself against family who took advantage of you. Margaret's life story: retired nurse after 40 years, widowed for 5 years after husband Robert's death. Relationship with only son. Daniel supported him through college, helped with down payment on his house. Daniel's marriage to Jessica 3 years ago, an initial positive relationship. Jessica's domineering mother, Pamela, and her influence over the couple. Subtle changes in Daniel's behavior after marriage, less communicative, more secretive about finances. Financial arrangement. Margaret added Daniel to her accounts after Robert's death for emergency purposes. Margaret's careful saving habits and modest retirement plans. Recent health scare that made Margaret reflect on her relationship with Daniel. Christmas gathering where Pamela made pointed remarks about Margaret's savings, just sitting there. Daniel and Jessica's increasing financial struggles despite good jobs. Due to lavish lifestyle, Margaret's routine morning checking her accounts online, the shocking moment seeing her main account balance at $212 instead of over $150,000, initial panic and confusion calls to the bank, discovering a series of large withdrawals made by Daniel over 2 weeks, trying to reach Daniel by phone, getting only voicemail, Jessica not answering calls either. Finding the social media posts, Daniel, Jessica and Pamela in Paris, London, Rome, captions about living their best life and finally taking the European dream vacation. Pamela's comments about deserving this after all these years of hard work. The devastating realization that they took her life savings for a luxury vacation. Final attempt to contact Daniel, receiving only a brief text. Needed this. We'll pay you back someday. Emotional breakdown, grief, betrayal, disbelief. Visit to the bank with account statements and authorization documents. Meeting with bank manager who explains Daniel had legal access to the accounts. Consultation with friend Linda, a retired paralegal. First legal consultation revealing the difficulty of the situation due to authorized access. Second opinion from another lawyer who suggests potential elder abuse angle. Decision to fight back methodically rather than emotionally. Research into Daniel and Jessica's finances, mortgage, car loans, credit cards. Discovery that Daniel had been hiding financial problems for months. Finding the connection. Pamela had recently been denied a loan for her own European vacation. Margaret's careful documentation of everything: withdrawals, social media posts, text messages. Development of a 3-part strategy for justice. Contacting the police to file a report for financial exploitation of an elderly person. Meeting with a specialized prosecutor who handles elder abuse cases. Providing all documentation and evidence to authorities. Working with bank fraud department to challenge the withdrawals. Sending formal demand letter to Daniel via certified mail to his home. Contacting Daniel's employer's HR department regarding potential theft. Reaching out to Jessica's workplace with questions about their vacation approval. Informing family members about the situation with facts rather than emotions. Setting up monitoring on all remaining financial accounts and credit reports. Changing all passwords, security questions, and account access. Meeting with a state attorney to completely revise will and remove Daniel as beneficiary. Removing Daniel as medical power of attorney and advance directive contact. Tracking the trio's European adventure through social media updates. 3 days after executing her plan, receiving frantic call from Daniel. What did you do? I hate you. Daniel's panic when his credit cards are declined at luxury hotel in Rome. Jessica's hysterical call about being contacted by her workplace regarding unauthorized vacation. Pamela's angry message accusing Margaret of ruining their trip out of jealousy. Daniel's return to find police investigation notice and potential criminal charges. The bank freezing. Daniel and Jessica's accounts pending fraud investigation. Jessica's employer placing her on unpaid leave during investigation. Daniel facing possible termination for ethical violations. The mounting legal fees and financial consequences hitting the couple. Pamela forced to pay for emergency flights home, maxing out her credit cards. Margaret's calm response to their panic. Actions have consequences. Face-to-face meeting at Margaret's home with Daniel, Jessica, and a mediator. Daniel's attempts to minimize his actions. It was just a loan. Jessica blaming Margaret for overreacting to a family matter, revealing the full extent of consequences they now face. Potential criminal charges, job loss, credit destruction, Margaret's powerful statement about trust, respect, and responsibility. Jessica's breaking point admitting it was her mother's idea to use Margaret's money. Daniel's tearful confession of mounting debts and pressure from Jessica and Pamela. The mediator's proposed resolution, full repayment plan therapy, legal consequences. Margaret's conditions for dropping charges, complete financial transparency, repayment with interest community service. Jessica's parents' reaction when they learned the full story. Father's shame, mother's defiance. Initial rebuilding steps. Daniel selling luxury car. Jessica returning designer purchases. The permanent damage to relationships and trust despite financial resolution. 6 months later. Progress on repayment plan. Daniel and Jessica's more modest lifestyle. Margaret's journey of emotional healing through support groups for financial abuse survivors. New financial safeguards. Trust, establishment, legal protections separate accounts. Rebuilding limited contact with Daniel under strict boundaries. Jessica's growth separating from her mother's materialistic influence, taking responsibility. Pamela's continued resentment and eventual estrangement from the situation. Margaret's newfound strength and confidence in protecting herself. New friendships formed through support groups and community involvement. Daniel and Jessica's marriage struggles and eventual commitment to counseling. The slow, difficult process of rebuilding trust in small increments. Margaret's decision to use part of the repaid money to establish a fund for elder abuse education. Unexpected positive outcomes. Closer relationship with Daniel's father-in-law, who was equally appalled. 2 years later, family dinner with new understanding and clearer boundaries. Margaret's reflections on forgiveness versus forgetting. I can forgive without forgetting to protect myself. Final thoughts on family trust and the courage to stand up for oneself. Closing with call to action. Have you ever had to stand up to family who betrayed your trust? Share your story in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video if it resonated with you. Subscribe for more real-life stories of resilience and share with someone who might need to hear that it's never too late to demand respect. Thank you for listening to my journey from betrayal to empowerment. Now I'll begin writing the full 12,000-word story based on this outline. My name is Margaret. I'm 62 years old, and I never thought my only son Daniel would steal from me. After my husband died, I added Daniel to my accounts in case of emergency. Last month, I woke up to find my life savings gone, $150,000 vanished. Hours later, I saw the Facebook photos of Daniel, his wife Jessica, and her mother living it up in Europe with my money. They never thought I'd fight back. Before I tell you how my own son betrayed me and what I did about it, let me know where you're watching from. Hit that subscribe button if you've ever had to stand up for yourself against family who took advantage of you. This isn't just a story about theft, it's about finding strength when those closest to you break your heart. I spent 40 years as a nurse at Memorial Hospital in our small Midwestern town. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was honest and meaningful. My husband Robert and I lived modestly in the same 3-bedroom ranch house we bought as newlyweds. We drove sensible cars, took affordable vacations, and put away as much as we could for retirement. Robert always said, "We're not saving to be rich. We're saving so we don't have to worry." Those words became even more meaningful after he passed away from heart failure 5 years ago. Daniel was our only child born when I was 26 after several difficult miscarriages. Perhaps because of those earlier losses, Robert and I poured everything into raising him. We weren't perfect parents by any means, but we tried our best to teach him good values, the importance of education, and financial responsibility. When Daniel showed academic promise, we encouraged his studies and helped him apply for scholarships. He graduated with a degree in business administration and found a good job at a marketing firm in the city about an hour from our home. Robert and I were so proud of him. When Daniel was 28, we helped with the down payment on his first house, a modest but nice starter home in a good neighborhood. It was a stretch for us financially, but seeing his excitement made it worthwhile. Daniel met Jessica at a company event 3 years ago. She worked in the same firm but in a different department. Jessica was attractive and confident with designer clothes and a polished appearance. When Daniel first brought her home to meet us, I noticed she seemed slightly underwhelmed by our simple house, but she was polite and made an effort to engage with us. Robert was still alive then, and he whispered to me later that she seemed a bit high maintenance, but we both agreed that if Daniel was happy, we were happy for him. Their wedding was larger and more extravagant than we expected. Jessica's parents, particularly her mother Pamela, insisted on an elaborate ceremony at an expensive venue with hundreds of guests, many of whom Daniel had never met. Robert and I contributed what we could, but Jessica's parents covered most of the costs, something Pamela reminded us of frequently during the planning process. After the wedding, I noticed subtle changes in Daniel. Our weekly Sunday dinners became monthly, then occasional. When they did visit, Daniel seemed distracted, checking his phone constantly. Jessica often dominated the conversation, talking about their renovations, vacations, or purchases. She had expensive tastes, furniture from designer stores, a luxury SUV, annual trips to resorts. Daniel went along with it all, though sometimes I caught a flicker of stress cross his face when costs were mentioned. Pamela became a more prominent figure in their lives after the marriage. A twice-divorced real estate agent with a flashy lifestyle, she had strong opinions about everything, especially money. "You need to live while you're young," she would say. "What's the point of saving it all for some nursing home?" When Robert was diagnosed with heart disease, Pamela actually suggested they delay visiting because they had tickets to a concert. Daniel seemed torn, but ultimately they came 3 days later than planned. Robert never said anything, but I know it hurt him. When Robert passed away, Daniel was genuinely devastated. He had always been closer to his father than to me, sharing interests in sports and woodworking that I didn't participate in. In the aftermath of the funeral, Daniel helped me organize Robert's affairs and suggested I add him to my accounts, just in case something happens to you, Mom. It seemed sensible at the time. I was 67, grieving and overwhelmed by suddenly handling everything alone. The bank representative explained that adding him would give Daniel full access, but I trusted my son completely. Why wouldn't I? The first couple of years after Robert's death, Daniel checked in regularly. He helped with home repairs, accompanied me to doctor appointments, and seemed genuinely concerned about my well-being. Jessica was less involved, but cordial when we met. I noticed their lifestyle continuing to escalate, a new, larger house in an exclusive neighborhood, expensive vacations documented extensively on social media, Jessica's growing collection of designer handbags and shoes. Meanwhile, I continued my careful financial habits. I lived on my pension and Social Security, rarely touching the savings Robert and I had accumulated. The money from Robert's life insurance and our joint investments had grown to just over $150,000. It wasn't a fortune, but it represented decades of careful planning and sacrifices. I saw it as security for potential medical needs or long-term care if my health declined. Last year, I had a health scare, a minor stroke that left me temporarily disoriented. Daniel seemed genuinely worried and visited me in the hospital daily. During one visit, he asked about my finances and whether I had updated my will since Robert's death. The question seemed reasonable given the circumstances, so I shared the details openly. I explained that most of my savings were in an easily accessible account that he had access to, and that I had a separate checking account for monthly expenses. I told him I planned to use some of the savings for a kitchen renovation I'd been postponing since Robert died. It was around this time that I began noticing changes in how Daniel and Jessica interacted with me. After my recovery, they invited me to dinner more frequently, often bringing up topics like my retirement plans or what I intended to do with all that money just sitting in the bank. Jessica would casually mention investment opportunities or suggest I might want to enjoy life more by traveling or buying luxury items. During a Christmas gathering at their home last December, I overheard a conversation between Jessica and her mother that troubled me. They were in the kitchen, not realizing I had come in through the back door with a dessert I'd brought. "It's ridiculous," Pamela was saying. "All that money just sitting there while she lives like she's poor. When my mother was her age, she had already put her house in my name and given me access to everything." "I know," Jessica replied, lowering her voice. "Daniel says we need to respect her choices, but honestly, she's not getting any younger. What's she saving it for?" I quietly backed out before they saw me unsettled by their tone and the entitlement it suggested. That night, I noticed Daniel seemed stressed, barely touching his food and drinking more wine than usual. When I asked if everything was all right, Jessica quickly answered for him. "Just work pressure. His boss is being completely unreasonable about the quarter's targets." Later, I would learn that wasn't true at all. Daniel and Jessica were drowning in debt despite their good salaries. Their mortgage was underwater after taking out a second loan for renovations. They had maxed out multiple credit cards maintaining their lavish lifestyle. Jessica's shopping habits had spiraled out of control, and Daniel couldn't bring himself to confront her. Behind their carefully curated social media presence was a financial house of cards on the verge of collapse. I wish I had recognized the warning signs sooner. I wish I had paid attention to the subtle shifts in our conversations toward money matters, the increasing presence of Pamela in their financial decisions, the way Daniel would change the subject when I asked about their new purchases. But I trusted my son, the boy I had raised, to be honest and responsible. I never imagined he would betray that trust in such a devastating way. The morning everything changed started like any other Tuesday. I woke up early, made my coffee, and sat down at my small desk in the corner of the living room to check my emails and bank accounts online. It was a routine I'd established after Robert died, a way to stay on top of my finances and ensure everything was in order. I logged into my bank account expecting to see the usual balance just over $150,000. Instead, the screen showed a balance of $212.47. At first, I thought there must be some mistake, perhaps a technical glitch with the website. I refreshed the page, but the balance remained the same. My heart began to race as I clicked on the transaction history. What I saw made me physically ill. Over the past 2 weeks, there had been a series of large withdrawals from the account. $10,000 on Monday the 3rd, $25,000 on Thursday the 6th, another $50,000 the following Monday. The pattern continued until almost every penny of my life savings had been transferred out. All of the withdrawals had been made by the same person, Daniel Harrison, my son. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone as I dialed Daniel's number. The call went straight to voicemail. I tried again with the same result. Then I tried Jessica's phone, but it also went to voicemail. I left urgent messages for both of them, trying to keep my voice steady, despite the panic rising in my chest. "Daniel, this is Mom. There's something very wrong with my savings account. Most of the money is gone. Please call me back immediately." "Jessica, I'm trying to reach Daniel about an emergency with my bank account. Please have him call me as soon as possible." While waiting for a return call that never came, I called the bank's customer service line. The representative confirmed what I already knew. The withdrawals were legitimate transactions made by an authorized user on the account. Daniel had access to withdraw funds without any additional verification. When I explained that I hadn't authorized these specific withdrawals, the representative suggested I come into my local branch to discuss the situation with a manager. As I was getting dressed to go to the bank, still in a state of shock, my phone pinged with a notification from Facebook. Normally, I would have ignored it until later, but some instinct made me check it immediately. It was a post from Jessica that had been tagged with both Daniel and her mother, Pamela. The photo showed the three of them smiling broadly in front of the Eiffel Tower. Jessica was wearing a new-looking designer outfit I'd never seen before, complete with an expensive handbag I recognized from advertisements. Daniel was dressed in what appeared to be new clothes as well, sporting an expensive watch that had not been on his wrist the last time I saw him. Pamela stood between them, champagne glass raised toward the camera. The caption read, "Finally living our best life. First stop on our European dream vacation, Paris today, London tomorrow, then on to Rome. So blessed to experience this with my amazing husband and wonderful mom. #dream vacation. Paris, European tour, blessed." The comments below the photo were filled with friends exclaiming over how wonderful it looked and asking how long they would be traveling. Jessica had responded to one comment, "3 weeks of pure luxury, we deserve this." Pamela had added her own comment, "After all these years of hard work, we finally get to enjoy the finer things in life, so proud of you both for making this happen." I sat down heavily on the edge of my bed, the phone clutched in my trembling hand. The terrible truth crashed over me in waves. My son had emptied my life savings, taking almost every penny I had carefully saved over decades of work to fund a lavish European vacation with his wife and mother-in-law. The money that represented Robert's and my lifetime of careful planning, the security I had counted on for my remaining years, was being spent on luxury hotels, expensive restaurants, and shopping sprees in Europe's fashion capitals. I scrolled through Jessica's profile and found more evidence. Photos of their first-class airplane seats posted 12 hours earlier, a check-in at a 5-star hotel in Paris, a selfie of Jessica showing off a new diamond bracelet with the caption, "Just a little something to start the trip right, treated, spoiled." In a daze, I returned to my phone and sent a text message directly to Daniel. "I see you're in Europe. I also see my bank account has been emptied. Please explain." Hours passed with no response. Finally, late that evening, a brief message appeared from Daniel's number. "Needed this. We'll pay you back someday. Don't worry." Don't worry. Don't worry. My entire life savings gone. My financial security vanished. My trust in my only child shattered. And he had the audacity to tell me not to worry. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in Robert's old armchair surrounded by photos of our life together, of Daniel growing up, trying to comprehend how we had arrived at this point. How had the little boy who once made me a world's best mom card in kindergarten become a man who could steal his mother's life savings without remorse? What had I done wrong as a parent? How had I been so blind to what was happening? By morning, a cold clarity had replaced my initial shock. This wasn't just a family disagreement or a misunderstanding. This was theft, plain and simple. The fact that it was committed by my own son didn't change that reality. And one thing Robert had always taught both Daniel and me: actions have consequences. The next morning, I drove to my local bank branch, a folder of printed account statements and authorization documents in hand. I had barely slept, but a strange calm had settled over me. Perhaps it was the nurse in me, trained to function in crisis situations, or perhaps it was simply that the shock had given way to determination. Either way, I was resolved to address this situation head-on. The bank manager, Mr. Williams, was a kind man in his 50s who had known Robert and me for years. When I explained the situation, his face registered genuine concern and sympathy. However, his explanation was exactly what I feared. "Mrs. Harrison, I completely understand your distress, and I'm so sorry this has happened," he said, reviewing the account documentation. "However, from a legal standpoint, when you added Daniel as a joint account holder, you gave him equal rights to access and withdraw funds. There are no restrictions on how much either account holder can withdraw or what they can use the money for. So you're telling me my son can legally take every penny I've saved without my knowledge or consent?" I asked, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "Unfortunately, yes. In a joint account situation, the bank cannot differentiate between funds belonging to one account holder versus another. Legally, all money in the account belongs equally to both parties." "What are my options?" I asked. "You could pursue this as a civil matter, suing your son for your portion of the funds," he explained carefully. "Or, if you believe this constitutes elder financial abuse, you could file a police report. But I must caution you that because he is an authorized user on the account, this becomes a complex legal situation." I left the bank with a new account in my name, only containing the meager $212 that remained of my savings. The rest of the day was spent in a whirlwind of activity, driven by a determination I hadn't felt in years. My first call was to my friend Linda, who had worked as a paralegal for 30 years before retiring. I explained the situation as factually as I could, though my voice broke several times during the telling. "Oh, Margaret," she sighed when I finished. "This is absolutely terrible, but unfortunately not uncommon. I saw cases like this regularly at the firm. The question now is how you want to proceed." "I want my money back," I said simply. and I want Daniel to understand that what he did was wrong. Then you need legal advice right away, Linda advised. I can recommend a couple of attorneys who specialize in elder law and financial abuse cases. But Margaret, you need to be prepared for this to potentially damage your relationship with Daniel permanently. Are you ready for that possibility? Linda, Daniel damaged our relationship when he stole my life savings, I replied. I'm his mother, not his personal ATM. Linda helped me set up appointments with 2 different attorneys for the following day. The first, Mr. Peterson, was sympathetic but not particularly encouraging. He explained that because Daniel was an authorized user on the account, proving theft would be difficult. The case would likely be viewed as a family dispute rather than a criminal matter. The fact that you voluntarily added him to the account complicates things significantly, Mr. Peterson explained. A civil suit is possible, but it would be expensive, time-consuming, and without guarantee of success, especially if the money is already being spent overseas. The second attorney, Ms. Ramirez, offered a slightly different perspective. She specialized in elder abuse cases and saw potential avenues to pursue. While it's true that joint account holders have equal legal access to funds, there are circumstances where withdrawals can be challenged, particularly when there's a power imbalance or when one party is elderly, she explained. The fact that all the money came from your earnings and was taken without discussion could support a claim of financial exploitation of an elderly person, which is taken more seriously by both civil and criminal courts. Ms. Ramirez advised me to file a police report immediately, gather all evidence of the withdrawals and social media posts documenting how the money was being spent, and send a formal demand letter to Daniel. She also suggested contacting Adult Protective Services, as financial exploitation of seniors fell under their purview in our state. One more thing, she added as our consultation ended. I recommend you start investigating your son's financial situation immediately. People don't usually steal from family unless they're in significant financial trouble themselves. Understanding the context may help build your case. That advice led me to my next step, researching Daniel and Jessica's financial situation. This proved easier than I expected. Daniel had used my address for several financial documents which continued to arrive occasionally. Additionally, he had used my computer during visits and hadn't always logged out of his accounts. I wasn't proud of accessing his information this way, but under the circumstances, I needed to understand what had led to this betrayal. What I discovered was alarming. Daniel and Jessica were deep in debt. Their mortgage payments on their luxury home were 2 months behind. They had maxed out 5 different credit cards. There were past due notices for Jessica's car, a high-end SUV with payments almost twice what Daniel's more modest car cost. Most concerning, there was an email from Daniel's company warning about his job performance slipping and placing him on a probationary period. The most revealing discovery came from Jessica's email, which she had once accessed on my tablet and never signed out of. There was an extensive correspondence between Jessica and her mother about a European vacation they had been planning for months. Pamela had initially intended to fund the trip herself, but had been denied a personal loan due to her own credit issues. That's when the conversation shifted to using Margaret's money instead. She's just letting it sit there anyway, Pamela had written. Daniel has access. She'd probably just give it to you if you asked, but why bother with the awkward conversation? She'll never even notice it's gone until you're back, and by then, what can she do? Jessica's reply had been hesitant at first, expressing concerns about Daniel's reluctance. But Pamela had persisted, eventually convincing Jessica that they deserved this trip and that I owed them for all the times Daniel had helped me after Robert died. The final piece came in an email from Jessica to Daniel with the subject line, "Please do this for me." In it, she essentially gave him an ultimatum: either find a way to fund the European vacation her mother had promised her, or she would have to reconsider their future together. She reminded him that her mother had paid for most of their wedding and had been waiting for years to take this trip. 3 days later, the first withdrawal from my account had been made. Armed with this information and documentation, I began to formulate a plan. This wasn't just about getting my money back anymore. It was about standing up for myself and ensuring that Daniel understood the severity of his actions. I wasn't a doormat to be walked over, nor an endless resource to be exploited. I was a person who deserved respect, particularly from my own child. By evening, I had outlined a three-part strategy: legal action, financial consequences, and public accountability. If Daniel thought he could simply enjoy his European adventure at my expense and return to business as usual, he was about to learn a difficult lesson about the real world. One I apparently had failed to teach him adequately as a parent. The next morning, I began executing my plan with a level of efficiency that would have made Robert proud. My first stop was the local police station, where I filed a formal report for financial exploitation of an elderly person. The officer taking my statement initially seemed skeptical when I explained that Daniel was an authorized user on the account, but his attitude shifted when I showed him the social media posts and the email exchanges between Jessica and her mother, explicitly discussing using my money without my knowledge. Unfortunately, we see cases like this quite often. The officer explained, his tone more sympathetic now. Financial exploitation of seniors is one of the fastest growing forms of elder abuse, and family members are frequently the perpetrators. He took detailed notes, made copies of my documentation, and assigned a case number. He explained that a detective from the Financial Crimes Unit would contact me for a follow-up interview, but warned me that these cases can take time to investigate. In the meantime, he advised, you should contact the bank's fraud department directly. While they may have initially told you there's nothing they can do because he's an authorized user, banks have been taking elder financial abuse more seriously in recent years. They may have protocols in place that weren't mentioned during your branch visit. From the police station, I went directly to the district attorney's office, where I had scheduled a meeting with a prosecutor who specialized in elder abuse cases. Ms. Jensen was a formidable woman in her 40s with a no-nonsense attitude and a clear passion for protecting vulnerable populations. The fact that your son was added to your account for emergency purposes but used it to fund a luxury vacation for himself. His wife and his mother-in-law constitutes a clear breach of fiduciary duty, she explained after reviewing my documentation. The emails discussing how to access your money without your knowledge demonstrate intent, which strengthens the case considerably. She warned me that prosecution would be challenging given the complexities of joint accounts, but she believed there was enough evidence to at least open an investigation. She promised to coordinate with the detective assigned to my case and to keep me informed of any developments. One thing you should be prepared for, Ms. Jensen cautioned, is that criminal prosecution, if it proceeds, will become a matter of public record. Your son could potentially face jail time depending on how the case develops. Are you prepared for that possibility? I considered her question carefully. The thought of Daniel in legal trouble, possibly even incarcerated, sent a wave of maternal pain through me. But I reminded myself that he was a grown man who had made a conscious decision to steal his mother's life savings. If he had done this to anyone else, there would be consequences. Why should it be different because I was his mother? I'm prepared, I finally answered. Daniel needs to understand the seriousness of what he's done. If that includes legal consequences, so be it. My next step was contacting the fraud department at my bank. The representative I spoke with was far more helpful than I had expected. She explained that while joint account holders generally have equal rights to the funds, there are exceptions for cases of suspected elder abuse. She flagged the withdrawals as potentially fraudulent and opened an investigation. We take elder financial abuse very seriously, she assured me. While I can't promise we can recover the funds, especially if they've already been spent, we will thoroughly investigate and cooperate fully with any legal proceedings. She also advised me to immediately send a certified letter to Daniel formally demanding the return of the funds. This would establish a paper trail showing I had taken prompt action upon discovering the withdrawals, which could be important in any subsequent legal proceedings. With the official channels in motion, I moved to the next phase of my plan, ensuring Daniel and Jessica faced immediate consequences for their actions, even while still enjoying their European adventure. My first call was to Daniel's employer. I had met his supervisor, Mr. Thompson, at a company event the previous year. I explained that I needed to reach Daniel regarding an urgent family financial matter, but had been unable to contact him directly. Without providing specific details of the theft, I mentioned that there were significant irregularities with shared accounts that required immediate attention and that law enforcement was involved. Mr. Thompson seemed concerned but cautious. Daniel did request 3 weeks of emergency family leave quite suddenly last week, he confirmed. He mentioned a situation with his grandmother in Europe that required immediate attention. Another lie. My mother had passed away years ago, and Daniel had no living grandmother, certainly not one in Europe. I'm his mother, I clarified, and I can assure you there is no family emergency in Europe. He and his wife are on vacation there using funds that were not authorized for their use. There was a long pause on the line. I see, Mr. Thompson finally said, his tone notably cooler. Given that Daniel is currently on probationary status with us due to performance issues, this is concerning, very concerning. Thank you for bringing this to my attention, Mrs. Harrison. I'll need to discuss this with our HR department. My next call was to Jessica's workplace, a boutique marketing agency where she worked as a client relations manager. I asked to speak with her supervisor regarding an urgent matter. When Ms. Rodriguez came on the line, I introduced myself and inquired whether Jessica had scheduled vacation time for this period. Yes, Jessica requested emergency leave just last week, Ms. Rodriguez confirmed. She mentioned a family health crisis that required immediate travel. Is everything okay? Actually, no, I replied truthfully. Jessica and my son are currently on a luxury vacation in Europe, posting photos from five-star hotels and shopping excursions. There is no family health crisis. The sharp intake of breath from Ms. Rodriguez told me this information was both surprising and unwelcome. Mrs. Harrison, thank you for bringing this to my attention. We take our leave policies very seriously, and misrepresenting the reason for emergency leave is a significant violation of our company policies. With the workplace notifications complete, I moved on to financial measures. I contacted all 3 major credit bureaus to place a fraud alert on my credit reports, ensuring Daniel couldn't open any new accounts in my name. I also consulted with my bank about the possibility of legally challenging any future attempts by Daniel to access any of my accounts or assets. Next came the family notifications. I called my sister Eleanor and my brother-in-law Frank, explaining the situation factually and without emotional embellishment. I also contacted Robert's brother James, who had remained close to us after Robert's death and had always been fond of Daniel. I'm telling you this not to turn you against Daniel, I explained to each of them, but so you're aware of the situation and understand why there may be legal proceedings and family tensions in the near future. Their reactions ranged from shock to outrage on my behalf, but all promised their support. James was particularly upset, having recently given Daniel a substantial check as an early inheritance gift money he now realized had likely funded part of the European excursion. The final step of this phase was perhaps the most difficult. I contacted an estate attorney to completely revise my will and remove Daniel as my beneficiary. The attorney, Mr. Goldstein, helped me establish a trust that would protect my remaining assets and any future recovery from Daniel's theft. He also assisted me in changing my medical power of attorney and advance directives, removing Daniel from those positions of responsibility as well. These changes can always be reversed in the future if circumstances warrant, Mr. Goldstein assured me. But for now, given the situation, it's prudent to protect yourself from further financial exploitation. As evening fell, I sat alone in my living room, emotionally and physically exhausted from the day's activities. My phone remained silent. No calls from Daniel or Jessica, though I hadn't really expected any. They were undoubtedly continuing their European adventure, blissfully unaware of the storm that was brewing back home. I picked up a framed photo of Daniel as a child, his gap-toothed smile beaming as he proudly held up a fish he'd caught with his father. Where had that sweet boy gone? How had he become a man capable of stealing from his own mother? "Oh, Robert," I whispered to the empty room, "where did we go wrong?" But even as I asked the question, I knew the answer wasn't simple. We hadn't been perfect parents, but we had taught Daniel right from wrong. The choices he made as an adult were his own, influenced perhaps by Jessica and her mother, but ultimately his responsibility. And now he would face the consequences of those choices, painful as that would be, for all of us. I placed the photo face down on the table and went to bed, falling into a deep, exhausted sleep for the first time since discovering the theft. The next few days passed in a strange limbo as I waited for my actions to bear fruit. I continued my normal routine as much as possible, tending to my garden, meeting friends for coffee, attending my weekly book club. I didn't hide what had happened entirely, but I shared the details selectively, not wanting to become the subject of town gossip. Meanwhile, I tracked Daniel, Jessica, and Pamela's European adventure through their prolific social media posts. They had moved from Paris to London, staying at another luxury hotel. Jessica posted photos of shopping bags from high-end stores, new outfits, expensive meals. Pamela shared pictures of herself getting spa treatments and touring in a private car. Daniel appeared in fewer photos, and I noticed his smile seemed strained in the later ones, his eyes lacking the carefree excitement evident in the earlier Paris pictures. On the third morning after I had set my plan in motion, my phone rang at 6:17 a.m. Daniel's name flashed on the screen. I took a deep breath and answered calmly. "Hello, Daniel." "What did you do?" he shouted, his voice a mixture of panic and rage. "Mom, what the hell did you do? I just got a call from the hotel management saying our credit cards have been declined, and there's some kind of fraud alert on my accounts. And Thompson from work called saying I need to contact HR immediately about misrepresenting my leave. I hate you for this." "I protected myself," I replied, maintaining my composure despite his outburst. "Something you forced me to do when you stole my life savings." "I didn't steal anything," he protested. "I was going to pay it back. It was just a loan." "A loan requires the lender's knowledge and consent, Daniel. You took $150,000 without asking me, without telling me to fund a luxury vacation. That's theft, not a loan." "You're overreacting. This is insane. Do you know how much trouble we're in now?" "The hotel is threatening to call the police if we don't pay our bill immediately, and we can't access any of our accounts." "Actions have consequences," I said, echoing the phrase Robert and I had repeated throughout Daniel's childhood. "You chose to take my money without permission. Now you're experiencing the consequences of that choice. This isn't just about me." Daniel's voice had taken on a desperate edge. "Jessica is hysterical. She got a call from her boss asking why she lied about emergency leave, and her mother had to use her emergency credit card just to book us flights home because everything else is frozen. This is going to ruin us." "I'm sorry you're in a difficult situation," I said, and despite everything, I meant it. I took no joy in his distress, but the situation is entirely of your own making. "What do you want from me?" he asked, his anger giving way to defeat. "I want my money back, every penny of it. I want you to take responsibility for what you've done, and I want you to understand that our relationship has fundamentally changed because of your actions." There was a long pause before Daniel spoke again, his voice quieter now. "Mom, we don't have the money to pay you back right now. A lot of it is already spent on non-refundable reservations and purchases." "Then you'll need to figure out how to come up with it," I replied, "just as I would have had to figure out how to survive in my retirement without the savings you took. Can we just talk about this when we get home? Try to work something out between us without all these lawyers and police reports and work problems? Please, Mom. This is family." "Yes, Daniel, it is family. That's what makes your betrayal so much worse." My voice finally betrayed a hint of the hurt I felt. "We will talk when you return, but not alone. I've arranged for a mediator to be present, and the legal processes I've initiated will continue." After we disconnected, I sat still for several minutes processing the conversation. There had been no apology, no genuine acknowledgement of wrongdoing, only panic at being caught and facing consequences. It confirmed that my decision to pursue formal action had been the right one. Daniel wouldn't have truly recognized the severity of what he'd done if I had simply confronted him privately upon his return. Later that morning, I received a hysterical call from Jessica, alternating between tearful pleas and angry accusations. "How could you do this to us?" she sobbed. "We're stranded in a foreign country. They're threatening to call the police if we don't pay our hotel bill. My boss is talking about termination for misrepresenting my leave. This is a complete overreaction to a simple misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding," I repeated incredulously. "Jessica, you and Daniel and your mother planned this deliberately. I've seen the emails discussing how to take my money without my knowledge." There was a startled silence on the other end of the line. "That's right," I continued. "I know this wasn't impulsive. I know your mother was denied a loan for this trip, so you decided to use my savings instead. I know you pressured Daniel into doing this with an ultimatum about your marriage. You had no right to read my private emails." Jessica's shock had turned to indignation. "And you had no right to steal my life savings," I countered. $150,000, Jessica. Money that took Robert and me 40 years to save. Money that was meant to support me through my remaining years. We were going to pay it back. Daniel had a plan. What plan exactly? With your maxed out credit cards and past due mortgage and car payments. With Daniel on probation at work. Please explain this brilliant financial plan to me. Another silence, this one longer. When Jessica spoke again, her voice was smaller. What do you want us to do now? Come home and face the consequences of your actions, I said simply. The longer you try to continue this charade in Europe, the worse the situation will become. Shortly after Jessica's call, I received a venomous voicemail from Pamela. She called me vindictive, jealous, and controlling. She accused me of overreacting to a simple family loan and claimed I was just angry because I hadn't been invited on the trip. She threatened to turn Daniel and Jessica against me permanently if I didn't fix this mess immediately. I deleted the message without responding. Pamela's opinion of me was irrelevant. She had encouraged her daughter and son-in-law to steal from me. Her moral judgment carried no weight. By the end of the day, I received confirmation from the credit card company that Daniel and Jessica were booking emergency economy flights home 3 days into what was supposed to be a 3-week luxury tour. Their grand European adventure had come to an abrupt and ignominious end, cut short by the reality of consequences catching up to them. I felt no triumph, no vindication, only a profound sadness that it had come to this. But beneath the sadness was something else, a growing sense of my own strength. I had stood up for myself. I had refused to be victimized without response. For perhaps the first time since Robert's death, I felt fully in control of my own life. Daniel, Jessica, and Pamela returned from Europe 4 days after my confrontational phone call with Daniel. They had managed to secure economy flights home after Pamela maxed out her emergency credit card to cover the cost. According to my neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins, whose daughter worked at the airport, they looked exhausted and disheveled as they trudged through the terminal, a far cry from the exuberant travelers who had departed just a week earlier. I had arranged for our first meeting to take place at my home 2 days after their return, giving them time to deal with their immediate jet lag and giving me time to prepare. At my request, Linda had agreed to act as a mediator for the discussion. As a former paralegal with experience in family disputes, she was well suited to the role, and her presence would help ensure the conversation remained productive rather than devolving into emotional accusations. They arrived precisely at the scheduled time, which surprised me given Daniel's habitual lateness. Pamela was notably absent, though I had extended the invitation to include her, believing she should be part of the accountability process. Daniel looked haggard with dark circles under his eyes and a defeated slump to his shoulders. Jessica appeared equally drained, her designer clothes from the European photos replaced by simple jeans and a plain sweater. They sat stiffly on my sofa, declining offers of coffee or water. Linda opened the meeting by establishing ground rules. Each person would have uninterrupted time to speak. Personal attacks would not be permitted, and the goal was to reach a resolution that acknowledged the harm done while creating a path forward. I spoke first, laying out exactly what had happened from my perspective and how it had affected me. When I discovered the money missing and then saw the social media posts, I felt not only financially violated but deeply betrayed. I explained, keeping my voice steady. This wasn't just money, it represented Robert's and my entire working lives, our security, our careful planning for the future. More painful than the financial loss was realizing that my own son could do this to me, could see me as nothing more than a resource to exploit. Daniel shifted uncomfortably but remained silent as I continued. I want to understand how you could justify this to yourselves. I want to know what you thought would happen when I inevitably discovered the theft. And I need you to understand that regardless of your intentions to pay it back someday, what you did was legally and morally wrong. When it was Daniel's turn to speak, he attempted to minimize his actions at first. Mom, I know you're upset and I understand why, but this has all been blown completely out of proportion. It was just a loan, not a theft. I fully intended to pay you back. With what money, Daniel? Linda interjected. From what Margaret has told me, your financial situation was already precarious before this trip. What was your repayment plan? Daniel looked down at his hands. I was expecting a bonus at work, and we were going to cut back on expenses. A bonus from the job where you were already on probation? I asked quietly. The same job where you lied about a family emergency to get leave for your vacation. Jessica spoke up, her voice tight with restrained emotion. This wasn't supposed to happen like this. My mother had been planning this trip for years. She promised to take me to Europe for my 30th birthday. When she couldn't get the loan, she suggested using Margaret's savings, temporarily. And you thought that was acceptable? Linda asked her. My mother said. Jessica paused, seeming to realize the weakness of her defense. She said Margaret had plenty of money just sitting there and that she probably wouldn't even notice for a while, that by the time she did, we'd have a plan to pay it back. So your defense is that you thought you could get away with it long enough to figure out how to fix it later. Linda's tone was measured but pointed. When you put it like that, it sounds terrible, Jessica said, her eyes filling with tears. Because it is terrible, I replied. Do you understand what would have happened to me if I hadn't discovered this? Until you returned, my mortgage payment, utilities, and medical bills are all automatically deducted from my checking account, which holds a limited amount. Once those payments exceeded my balance, I would have faced overdraft fees, late payment penalties, and possibly even service disconnections, all while you were posting pictures from luxury hotels in Europe. Daniel looked genuinely stricken for the first time. I didn't think about that. I just wanted to make Jessica happy. Her mother kept pressuring us about this trip, saying we were denying Jessica her dream, that I wasn't providing the lifestyle she deserved. So you stole from your mother to impress your wife and mother-in-law? Linda asked bluntly. When you say it like that, Daniel trailed off, unable to complete the sentence. There's no other way to say it, I told him. That's exactly what happened. The conversation continued for over 2 hours, gradually moving from denial and minimization toward a more honest acknowledgement of what had occurred. The turning point came when Jessica, who had been growing increasingly uncomfortable with Daniel's evasions, finally broke down. It was my fault, she admitted, tears streaming down her face. I was the one who pushed Daniel to do this. My mother kept talking about how other daughters, her friends' daughters, were taking these amazing international trips, living in bigger houses, driving better cars. She made me feel like I was failing somehow, like Daniel wasn't successful enough. I became obsessed with proving her wrong, with showing her that we could have those things too. She turned to me, her makeup streaked with tears. I never stopped to think about what it would mean for you. I just saw the money as an abstract thing, not as your security, your future. I'm so ashamed now. Her honesty seemed to break something in Daniel as well. He finally admitted that he had been drowning under the pressure of maintaining their lifestyle, particularly after Jessica's mother moved closer to them following her second divorce. Pamela was always there, always commenting on what we didn't have, comparing us to other couples, making Jessica feel inadequate, he explained. And I felt like a failure for not being able to give Jessica everything she wanted. When the opportunity to take this trip came up, it seemed like a way to finally make them both happy, to prove I could provide that kind of lifestyle. By stealing from your mother, Linda pressed. Daniel closed his eyes briefly, then nodded. Yes, by stealing from my mother. There's no other word for it. I told myself it was just borrowing, that you had so much saved, and I would replace it eventually, but I knew it was wrong. I knew you would never have agreed to it if I'd asked. Why didn't you ask? I questioned, genuinely wanting to understand. If you were in such financial trouble, why not come to me honestly? I might have been able to help in some way, even if not to the tune of $150,000 for a vacation. Because I was ashamed, Daniel admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. I didn't want you to know how badly I'd failed at managing our finances, how completely I'd given in to Jessica and Pamela's pressure to live beyond our means. It was easier to take the money in secret than to admit I needed help. With the truth finally acknowledged, we moved on to discussing consequences and resolution. I explained the legal actions I had initiated and the potential ramifications Daniel and Jessica faced. I've filed reports for elder financial abuse with both the police and Adult Protective Services, I informed them. The bank has opened a fraud investigation. Your employers are reviewing your emergency leave requests, which were obtained under false pretenses. These processes are now in motion and largely outside my control. Jessica paled visibly. Are we going to jail? That depends on a number of factors, Linda explained. Margaret has the option to request leniency if you demonstrate genuine remorse and make concrete efforts to make amends. But there will definitely be consequences, both legal and financial. I laid out my conditions for potentially mitigating the legal consequences, full financial transparency, including detailed accounting of all their expenses and debts, a formal, legally binding repayment plan with interest, regular financial counseling sessions, and community service related to elder financial abuse awareness. Additionally, I added, I want no contact with Pamela until she acknowledges her role in this situation and apologizes sincerely. She was the instigator, according to your own admissions, and her voicemail to me showed no remorse whatsoever. Daniel and Jessica agreed to all conditions, appearing genuinely relieved that there might be a path forward that didn't involve criminal prosecution. Before they left, Daniel asked a question that had clearly been weighing on him. Mom, do you think you'll ever be able to forgive me? I considered his question carefully before responding. Forgiveness is a process, Daniel, not an event. I'm working toward it, but trust has been deeply broken here. Rebuilding it will take time, consistent, honest behavior, and genuine amends. I will always love you as my son, but our relationship has fundamentally changed. After they left, Linda stayed for a cup of tea, both of us emotionally drained from the intense conversation. You handled that remarkably well, she told me. Many people in your position would have been too angry or hurt to maintain such clarity. I was a nurse for 40 years, I reminded her. I've learned to function effectively, even when emotions are running high. Besides, falling apart wouldn't solve anything. What will you do now? She asked. Live my life on my terms, I replied, and make sure this situation is resolved in a way that honors Robert's and my lifetime of work, while still leaving room for healing if possible. Later that evening, I received a text message from Jessica's father, Richard, a quiet, hardworking man who had always seemed overshadowed by his ex-wife's dominant personality. Margaret, I just heard what happened from Jessica. I am deeply ashamed of my daughter's actions and horrified by Pamela's role in this. Please know that I do not condone what they did in any way. If there's anything I can do to help make this right, please let me know. His message, unexpected but welcome, reminded me that accountability and integrity still existed even in this painful situation. It was a small comfort as I navigated this unwanted new chapter in my life. In the 6 months that followed our confrontation, significant changes occurred in all our lives. Daniel and Jessica began the difficult process of making amends both to me and to the institutions affected by their actions. The path was neither straight nor easy, but they appeared committed to taking responsibility for what they had done. Their first step was selling their luxury home, which they could never truly afford. They moved into a modest 2-bedroom apartment at half the monthly cost, using the proceeds from the house sale to begin repaying me. Jessica sold most of her designer clothing and accessories through consignment shops, contributing those funds to the restitution as well. Daniel faced a formal disciplinary hearing at his workplace for misrepresenting his leave. He was fortunate to keep his job, though he was demoted and placed on a strict performance improvement plan. Jessica wasn't as lucky. Her company terminated her employment after confirming she had lied about a family emergency. After several months of searching, she found a new position at a smaller firm with a significant reduction in salary. The legal consequences were mitigated by their cooperation and my willingness to accept a structured repayment plan in lieu of pursuing criminal charges. The prosecutor agreed to suspend the elder abuse case conditionally, pending their full compliance with the financial restitution agreement and completion of 200 hours of community service each. As part of their service hours, both Daniel and Jessica began volunteering with a local organization that educated seniors about financial scams and exploitation. The irony of this assignment wasn't lost on any of us, but over time, I could see that the experience was genuinely affecting them, particularly Daniel. Hearing stories from other elderly victims of financial abuse seemed to deepen his understanding of the impact of his actions. Pamela remained a problematic figure in the situation. Initially, she refused to acknowledge any wrongdoing, maintaining that I had overreacted to what she called a family financial arrangement. She attempted to contact me several times, leaving messages that vacillated between half-hearted apologies and thinly veiled accusations that I was being vindictive and destroying her daughter's marriage. I maintained my boundary of no contact, which Jessica eventually came to respect, though it created tension in her relationship with her mother. The breaking point came when Pamela, frustrated by her daughter's increasing independence, showed up unannounced at their apartment and discovered Jessica packing up her designer purses to sell. "Those were gifts from me," Pamela had apparently shouted. "You can't sell them to pay back that old woman. She has more money than she needs anyway." According to Jessica, who tearfully recounted the incident during one of our mediated meetings, Daniel had finally stood up to his mother-in-law. "That old woman is my mother," he had told Pamela firmly, "and we stole her life savings because you convinced us it was acceptable. We're selling everything we can to make this right, and if you can't support that, you need to leave." Pamela had stormed out and reduced her contact with them significantly afterward. This created breathing room for Jessica to begin examining the unhealthy dynamics in her relationship with her mother, a process she explored further in the therapy sessions that were part of our agreement. As for me, I focused on rebuilding my financial security and emotional well-being. With the initial repayments from Daniel and Jessica, plus a modest insurance claim, the bank processed after classifying some of the withdrawals as fraudulent, I had recovered about 30% of my savings by the 6-month mark. It wasn't enough to fully restore my financial position, but it was a start. I joined a support group for survivors of elder financial abuse, discovering, to my surprise, that many members had experienced similar betrayals by family members. Sharing my story and hearing others' experiences helped me process my feelings and reduce my sense of isolation. One gentleman in the group, Arthur, had lost his entire retirement fund to a grandson with a gambling addiction. Another woman, Darlene, had been financially exploited by her daughter and son-in-law who had added themselves to her accounts without her knowledge. "The hardest part," Darlene confided during one meeting, "isn't the money. It's the betrayal of trust, especially when it's your own child. How do you reconcile the person you raised with someone capable of such deception?" Her words resonated deeply with my own experience. In many ways, the emotional damage had been more difficult to address than the financial loss. I had raised Daniel to be honest and responsible. I had trusted him completely. Reconciling my image of my son with his actions required significant emotional work on my part. Working with a therapist who specialized in family betrayal, I explored my feelings of guilt and self-blame. Had I somehow failed as a mother? Were there signs I should have recognized earlier? My therapist helped me understand that while I could examine these questions, ultimately, Daniel's choices were his own. I could acknowledge the complex factors that influenced him, including Jessica and Pamela's pressure, without accepting responsibility for his actions. One of the most healing developments during this period was my unexpected friendship with Richard, Jessica's father. After his initial text message expressing shame over his daughter's actions, we began communicating regularly. He had divorced Pamela 10 years earlier, citing her materialistic values and constant dissatisfaction as major factors in their separation. Now, he was watching those same traits impact his daughter's marriage and moral compass. "Pamela always taught Jessica that appearances matter more than substance," he explained during one of our coffee meetings. "Nothing was ever enough. The house was never big enough, the car never new enough, the vacation never exotic enough. I tried to counter that influence, but after the divorce, my time with Jessica was limited." Richard became an unexpected ally in the healing process. He attended several of the mediated sessions with Daniel and Jessica, providing both support and accountability. His presence seemed to particularly impact Jessica, who began to reevaluate many of the values and expectations her mother had instilled in her. By the 1-year mark, Daniel and Jessica had repaid approximately $60,000 through their combined efforts, selling assets, taking on additional work, and drastically reducing their expenses. They had completed their community service hours and continued volunteering with the Elder Financial Abuse Awareness Program even after fulfilling their required time. More significant than the financial restitution was the genuine change I observed in both of them. Daniel had begun to reclaim the values Robert and I had taught him, showing increasing accountability and honesty in his interactions with me and others. Jessica, separated from her mother's constant influence, was discovering a more authentic sense of self and purpose that wasn't defined by material possessions or appearances. Our relationship remained fundamentally altered. We would never return to the easy trust and closeness we had shared before the theft. But we were building something new, something based on hard-earned truth and clearer boundaries. I had revised my will to include Daniel again, though, with specific conditions and protections in place. The trust established by my attorney remained as a safeguard, ensuring my remaining assets would be protected regardless of future developments. Perhaps the most unexpected positive outcome was my growing friendship with Richard, which gradually evolved into something deeper. Both widowed and shaped by similar values of honesty and simplicity, we found comfort and joy in each other's company. Our shared experience of having a child who had made serious mistakes created a unique bond of understanding between us. 2 years after the initial discovery of the theft, we gathered for a family dinner. Richard, myself, Daniel, and Jessica. Notably absent was Pamela, who had eventually moved to Florida after her relationship with Jessica deteriorated further. The conversation was easier than it had been in many months, touched with a cautious warmth that suggested healing was possible even after profound betrayal. After dinner, as Daniel helped me clear the dishes, he paused and spoke quietly. "Mom, I know I can never fully undo what I did, but I want you to know that I think about it every day and I'm working to be the son you and Dad raised me to be." "I know you are," I replied, and I meant it. The pain hadn't disappeared entirely, but it had transformed into something that could coexist with love and hope for the future. Later that evening, after Daniel and Jessica had left and Richard had gone home, I sat alone in my living room reflecting on the journey of the past 2 years. I picked up the photo of Daniel as a child that I had placed face down the night I discovered the theft. Looking at his innocent smile, I felt a complex mixture of emotions: sadness for what had been lost, gratitude for what had been saved, hope for what might still be built. The experience had changed me profoundly. I was more cautious now, more aware of the need for boundaries even with those closest to me. But I was also stronger, more confident in my ability to stand up for myself and navigate difficult situations. In protecting myself from further exploitation, I had discovered resources and resilience I hadn't known I possessed. Forgiveness, I had learned, wasn't a single decision, but a daily choice, one that didn't negate the need for accountability and change. Daniel and Jessica were working to earn back trust day by day, step by step, and I was working to balance prudent caution with openness to healing. None of us would ever be the same as before, but perhaps we could be better in some ways, more authentic, more mindful of how our choices impact others, more appreciative of relationships based on respect rather than exploitation. Have you ever had to stand up to family who betrayed your trust? Share your story in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video if it resonated with you. Subscribe for more real-life stories of resilience and share with someone who might need to hear that it's never too late to demand respect. Thank you for listening to my journey from betrayal to empowerment. Remember that protecting yourself from mistreatment isn't selfish. It's an act of self-respect that can ultimately lead to healthier relationships for everyone involved.